Hi everybody, good afternoon. This is Jean here from True Love Quilts for You. I'm coming from a snowy Sunday afternoon here in Pennsylvania. I like the cold weather, I like the snow, and we had a lovely, just a sprinkling really, but it was nice. Everything looks so clean and fresh. I'm going to be doing a tutorial today. And it's not, I've been concentrating, as you know, my last few tutorials on small little things, gifts, but what I really do is I make quilts, as you know. And I've been working on a very easy quilt. Having said that, it's not necessarily a fast project. I'm going to show you it. I haven't yet quilted it. I'm going to be quilting it along with my other two quilts that I'm actually going to I've done my flying geese quilt, if you remember that one, and my panel, my Asian panel quilt. I'm going to just concentrate on quilting these three quilts, and then I'll do a quilt show and tell. As you know, just want to sort of say something. As you know, I'm a collector of fabric, and I've been collecting all things fabric forever. And it might not look like my sewing room when I'm in my front room, of course. My sewing room is, my fabric stash is going away, but it is. I go shopping in my front room, in my sewing room. And what I had tucked away is I had a really nice experience about maybe 10, 12, 13 years ago when I first started to quilt. I've been sewing my whole life, but I started to quilt. My husband, actually, who's in sales, he was doing a job at a home of a client, and the woman was saying to him, oh, the garage was filled with boxes and totes and containers of fabric. And here her husband was a fabric manufacturer's representatives, quite a few manufacturers. He would get samples of quilting cotton and go around to different quilt stores to sell them the different lines. So he had boxes and boxes of samples of fabrics. And she's like, oh, I don't know what to do with all this fabric. Well, my husband was like, oh my word, my wife has just started quilting. She said, oh, she can come over and have a look. So I went, I had a field day. I don't know if she didn't realize what she had, this gold mine, but there was panels and yardage and sample pieces that were actually the size of fat quarters. 18 by 22 inch, just samples that you would take. You know how they're like almost like drapery samples with the cardboard on the top and hanging. Boxes and boxes. I got so much of my fabric from there. But she also had, he also had charm squares. Not like beautifully wrapped, just in sort of like a cardboard. I must have gotten 40 charm, 42-inch packs, 42-inch pieces of charm squares. I must have gotten 40 packs. And my husband's like, well, how much do you want? She said, I don't know, $1 a piece. They're like $9 a piece, So I got all of these charm packs. This is my quilt. I've been hanging, these charm squares have been hanging around. So I thought I'm just going to start using these up. This quilt actually is called a coin quilt. And I just used 4 packs of my charm squares. I couldn't tell you what fabric line it comes from. I couldn't tell you, but it's just tons of charm squares that I cut up. Now, this is 1 block, and then the border, and the 1 block. I don't know. Again, does it finish at 8.5 inches? I trimmed it to 8.5 inches. I don't know. I give you the dimensions of what you need, or I give you not the ingredients. What is that word? I give you what you need for the quilt in my tutorial following. But just a few things I want to tell you about this little quilt. It's not hard. This is not hard. And this you can use scraps if you have. I happen to use as I said, my 5-inch by 5-inch charm squares, because you're going to need 2 pieces of your charm square. You're going to need a 3-inch by 5-inch. And then off of that subcut, you're going to need a 2-inch by 5-inch. So this quilt comprised of 4 42-inch packs of charm squares, 5-inch squares. You need 168 of your charm squares. So you need, if you would want to cut it from yardage, you would need 168 5x3s. and 82 for the border, 5 by 2 inch. I used approximately four yards of white on here. I didn't take that much. I think it's like 3 3/4 yards. I got 4 yards. Again, I just pulled it from my stash. I had a bolt. And I'm going to be using about 4 1/4 yards of my backing, which actually is, it's a directional fabric. So it has like, it's like a woodland scene of, you know, oops, never mind, of, you know, deer and foxes. So it's directional. So I'm going to use about 4 1/4 yards of that. So my quilt, again, I give you the directions. I tried so hard, but I don't know how it was supposed to finish up. I don't know what size it finished up. I have made this quilt before, so I'd had these instructions hanging around. The end result is a 60 inch by 68 inch size. It's a large throw quilt. But I think the block should have been bigger because I had to sort of trim it down, square it up. I don't know what they do. Because to 8.5 inches. But I think it was supposed to be a bit bigger. But I don't know what I did wrong. But it turned out pretty because I trimmed each block up. Just one block. It's an 8.5 inch, you know me and my 8.5 inch ruler. I just sliced it off. So all the blocks, it's a quilt that has 6 blocks across. You can see 6 blocks across and 7 rows down. Real pretty. So you could use any scraps that you have, just start cutting them up. As I said, it's a very, very easy chain piecing to the max. I chain pieced everything. Chain piece, chain piece, chain piece. And I think later on I'm going to be, I actually chain piece my piecing and my ironing. So I think I'm just going to speed that up. You can see that I just kept doing it. So again, you might want to maybe cut everything out. I've told you, cut everything out, put it in Ziploc bags. I haven't yet quilted this, as you can see. I don't know how I'm going to quilt it. And I used a bit of, I'm going to be using a white binding. As I said before, I don't usually use white binding. But I did cut my 2.5 inch. I usually use, 2 1/4 inch binding. But for this, I wanted it to be a bit bigger on my edge here. So I cut my binding at 2.5 inches. But I've given you all the instructions, measurements of what you need to make this quilt. It's called a coin quilt. Why it's called that, I don't know. But I'm using up my fabric. I haven't gone fabric shopping. I'm using up my backing fabric that I pulled from my stash. So it's nice if you have a stash. A lot of people like to just do projects, buy what they need. In these times of economic hardships, maybe that's what you want to do. Get something in mind and then go purchase what you need. I personally like having my stuff, and as I said, I've been collecting forever. So that's my little tutorial for today. This lovely little quilt, it would make up beautifully with black sashing, you know, black in between, or red or gray. You could do it in batiks. Again, start cutting up your scraps. Total scrappy look. I was blessed enough to have my 4 packs of Charm Squares to cut out my units here. Again, very, very easy quilt. So that's my little Sunday afternoon. I'm going to start concentrating on actually quilting these other quilts. And then I'll do a quilt show of those 3 quilts that you've seen me make. And I'm going to start finishing them up. So that's my next few days. I'm going to concentrate on actual quilting my quilt. But this is my quilt top. I just wanted to share it with you. So I hope you enjoy the tutorial to follow. And again, thanks so very, very much for tuning in and watching me. I appreciate it. Okay, folks. Bye. So I'm going to start cutting out my charm squares for my this little coin nickel quilt, as it's called. I've started already. Now what you're going to be needing is I started out with 4 Charm Square packs. However, because you're going to be needing about 170 or so, I think it's about 168, 170 3-inch by 5-inch pieces of fabric from our Charm Squares. And then we're going to be needing, obviously that will leave us with, what, 170 or so 2-inch by 5-inch. However, you're only going to be needing about 80, I think it's about 85 or 90 of these. You're not going to be using all of the 2" by 5". So if you don't want to waste your charm pack, which I have tons of charm squares, I'm not bothered. I can always use these 2" by 5" in another project. I'm okay with that, to use my charm squares. However, if you wanted to use yardage, you would then be using, or 10" squares or something, you would then just be cutting about, on the bigger side, about 90 of these. The 2" by 5" pieces are around our border. Okay, the 2" ones are just the border. The 3" pieces are our blocks themselves. You're not going to be needing as many. So by all means, if you wanted to use yardage to cut about 90 of them, I'm erring on the larger side, but I'm cutting out my 3" and my 2". I'm okay with that. And the way I do it is I take about 5 or 6 pieces, or 7 or 8 or whatever, with my Fiskars ruler here. I've already started cutting, and I put my 5" charm square on the line, on the cutting line, and with whatever ruler you have, again, I'm going to my 3" mark. And a lot of people say, well, on these charm squares that are pinked or the ragged edge, where do you use? I use the outside pinked edge on my black line. I line it up all the way down, adjusting my ruler as I go. And my rotary cutter, again, is inside this ruler, and I just go along, and I know that these are 3" pieces, my 3" pieces that I'll put over here on my pile, and then I have my 2" pieces. Again, I won't be using them all, so I don't want you to think, I don't want you to think we're wasting fabric if you want to cut your 2" by 5" differently. Now I'll be cutting my strips. So I've started cutting my charm squares out, as I've shown you, and now I got about 4 yards. Actually, I have about 5 or 6 yards of this white fabric. But I think for the size I'm going to make, you need about 4 yards of fabric. What I have, this is how I cut. I have my Fiskars ruler here, and I just line up my fabric, and I am cutting at this point my white 1.5" strips. I'm cutting 42 of them. So I'll count them as I go along. I'm just going to line up my 1.5" ruler on that cut, on that line, and I just go along and I just keep cutting out my 1.5" strips. I have a long way to get to 42 of these strips, so I'll just keep going over there. Oops. Oh, that got messed up a bit. Yes, so I'm just going to keep cutting these out. I'm just going to bring my fabric over here. I actually have a bolt of fabric that I have pulled from my stash. But you want a lot of your white or black, as I was saying, whatever color. You could change it up with red, whatever. These are just a bunch of floral charm squares, as you've seen. My 2" and my 3" that I've cut out of my 5" square. And again, you've seen me do that. I just sort of cut en masse. I just keep cutting out my 1.5" strips out of this. I'll count them. I need 42, so I'll be here a while. I'm cutting out my white strips, and just so you keep in order for this quilt, what I've done is I have cut out, hopefully you can make a notation of this to keep yourself in order. I've cut out 42, with the fabric, 42 1.5" strips, and I've put them in a Ziploc bag marked. I have now cut out, this is my last cut here, I will have cut out 18 2" strips of my fabric, and I'll stick them in that Ziploc bag. It's just a little bit easier to keep track. Now what I'm going to do is one of my last cuts, is from my yardage. I'm going to line this up. I'm going to be needing 7 2.5-inch strips. And then what I will have done is I'll get my my Ziploc bag ready, and I want 7 2.5-inch strips so I can keep track. Because you'll be surprised that, you know, when you're pulling, if you get a little bit tired, your 1.5-inch strip might look like your 2-inch strip, and vice versa. So I'm going to be cutting now from my yardage. I'm just going to finish these white up, and I'm going to be cutting my strips. There's a couple squares we want to cut. I want to be cutting my 7 2.5. Let me move this bolt. I have a whole bolt of fabric here. I believe I got this on sale. It's not a solid, but it reads as a white solid. And when I see solids, as it were, I buy them in bulk, because you can always use yardage of solids. So I'm cutting my 2.5-inch. 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 4 there. Put it in my bag before I get confused. And now I just need 3 more of my 2.5-inch by the width of the fabric strips. So I'll be finishing that up. I've cut all my strips, and I have them carefully bagged. And the last bit of cutting we're going to need, I took the selvage off of just one end. We're going just to need 4 of the 5-inch corner squares. So I just lined up again on my ruler. I've just lined up the 5-inch to there, 5-inch. I'll cut 2. I'll cut 1 and 2. Did it cut now? I didn't think it would have done. I'm cutting towards me. Really shouldn't do that. Yeah. So, yeah, it's okay. So then I'm going to come along and I'm going to cut 2 more. I should turn the fabric around. Yeah, but that's okay. I'm just wanting to cut 4 5-inch squares. Probably didn't cut either. Yeah. You guys can do that properly. Okay, so I got 4 5-inch squares, and that's, I had bought a bolt of fabric. So this is all we need. Our cutting now is all done. I've done my charm squares, my 3-inch. I can't tell I can't tell these are 3-inch and these are 2-inch, and that's my 5-inch. You just want to keep your strips nice and orderly. Now we'll get to piecing the actual quilt block. You can see here, I've put my 3-inch strips, my 3-inch charm squares, 3-inch wide, and I've pulled out my bag that has my 1.5-inch strips. 42 of them have been cut. Want to pull that out from there, from the bag. Make sure if you have a tone on tone, as I do, that you have the right side facing. So we want the pretty sides together. I've already done one out of many. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be stitching our 3-inch charm square along the length of our charm square, along the strip with a 1/4-inch seam. I've already done this, as you can see, along the 1/4-inch seam. I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's how many charm square 3-inch pieces you're going to get on your 42-inch strip with a 1/4-inch seam. Now, just stitch them along as I've done here, and you just want to leave perhaps a 1/4 inch between your pieces. So, starting with my top one, I'll do my 1/4-inch seam right along here, and I put the pretty sides, the right sides to the right side of my strip, keeping those edges nice. And then I have an automatic lifter, which makes it so easy. Again, I just pull from my little pile here, pretty side down, leave about 1/4 inch. I'm just going to do it on the cut side, just to keep consistent. About a 1/4 inch between them. and then I'll just stitch down 1/4 of an inch, and I will continue doing this the whole length of my pieces. Let me put that way. The whole length of my pieces, and all 42 strips. This isn't, oops, I messed up. This isn't necessarily a quick project, I should say. This is a very easy project. You're just having to be aware of your sets, your strips, your squares. Oh, it keeps going. I have to push that under. Just have to be aware of everything. It's very, very simple once you get going, and then I'll show you how we're going to do the other bit on the other side of this. We've sewn down the one side of our 3-inch squares, our strips, right? Now what we want to do is we want to sew down the other side in order to get this, the unit that it's 5 inches square. It's going to be a strip, a 3-inch charm square, and a strip. So we've sewn down the one side, and I've already started this, and I want to show you how I've done it. Remember, we sewed on this side of the charm square, our one strip. Well, you just want to turn it over like this, and we have a little gap there. So what we're going to do is with our charm squares placed like this, the 8 of them, and our strip on this side, right sides together, pretty side to pretty side, we just want to take another 1.5 inch strip and place it along this. This is, as I said before, this is chain piecing to the max. So what we want to do, 1/4 inch, we just want to lay that down, and we see there's a gap here. And if we just keep our strips nice and straight, no marathon, make sure you push that underneath, that we can just stitch this unit, which will end up 5 inches square. We'll have the gap there. We just place this right on top of our sets that are fabrics that were squares that were already stitched, we already stitched. And then we're going to be making 1/4 inch seam. We are going to be making 21 of these strip set units here. I've already come along, and I've just started stitching them, as you can see. I'll be cutting them apart, but I'm just stitching strips to strips. We're going to be wanting, out of our 42 strips, we've cut our 42 strips. We're going to be using 21 on one side and 21 on the other, and then we'll have used up our 42-inch strips. So I'm just going to finish up this unit here, and then I'll finish along. I finished making my sets, and I will have made 21 of these. Remember, 21 down one side, 21 down the other, to have used up our 42-inch 1.5 inch strips. So now what we want to do, with whatever kind of ruler we have and a rotary cutter, we're just going to be cutting these pieces apart. I'm going to be taking off the edges right up to that little gap that we've used, and we're going to end up with this unit, which is a 5-inch square unit, and we're going to be having a whole bunch of them. So what we're just going to do now is, on your 21 strip sets, as it were, you're going to be cutting apart your 5-inch units. And what you want to do is you're going to be ironing. You're going to set your seams just like that. Just come along and set your seams real nice, and then you're going to be rolling your dark to the inside. You're going to be pressing your seam to the dark side. So you're going to end up with a unit like that, with the white, or with your sashing. All your seams are going to be pressed to the middle of your units, your 5-inch squares. So you're just going to, again, this is just as I was saying, chain piecing, chain piecing, chain piecing. We're just going to start cutting our squares, our strips, I mean. We're going to cut these strips apart, and then we're going to end up with our units. And then I'll come along, having ironed all of my bits, and then figure it out like a nice mixture of prints. I'm going to be showing you how the actual block of this quilt is constructed. Very, very easy quilt. Again, not a very fast project, but an easy project. Simple, simple, simple. Now, as you can see, after I've ironed my whole pile of 5-inch blocks, 5-inch squares, we're going to be making blocks. What we're going to be doing is just a very simple 4-patch block. This is 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, and I will continue taking all my pieces and making 42 of these blocks. Very important, the configuration of 1 block. I'm looking at the blocks this way. So what I want to do is I want to have, there's 1 block, I want to put this piece going this way, 1 block going across, up and down, across, up and down. My next block, across, up and down, across, up and down. We're going to continue making all of our blocks the exact same way. You're going to be constructing 42 of these blocks in this configuration exactly the same way. And it's just a 4-patch. This seam gets stitched, this seam gets stitched, this seam gets stitched, until you have 42 of these blocks. Okay, folks, you know that I am the first person, if I make a mistake, I admit it. And I may have made a mistake, or I may not have, because I don't quite understand, and I don't do things exactly like real quilters do. But what I've discovered is I don't know what these, I thought these were going to be 5.5-inch, 5-inch blocks here, these things here. But some of the, like, I think they're like 4.5 inches, but some of them are 4.5 by 5 inches. I don't know what I did wrong. Some of them turned out, when I put the 4-patch together, some of them turned out really good. I mean, really, really good, right? But then, I guess it was my sewing was off. Some of them turned out like this. Can you see? This is off and this is off, and it's off. But what I'm doing anyway, I've already started doing it on quite a lot of them, which it's okay. For me, it's okay. Maybe not for you if you want to be absolutely perfect. I take my 8.5-inch square, and I'm just going to trim them up. I guess this is what it means by when people say I'm putting that line in the middle, sort of, almost. They're trimming up their blocks to get them the exact same size. So this is my 8.5-inch square ruler, and it's just a sliver on each side to get my perfect 8.5 inch square. Now, having said that, like some of my, like this one is fine. My points matched, but you know me and my points, I don't really care. So I'm not, when I go to put my blocks together, they'll all be the exact same, but maybe the center line won't match up perfect, or maybe it will. I don't know. Anyway, this is what I'm doing. I'm squaring up my blocks. I'm trimming my blocks up, as you can see, to make them all exactly the same size. Which a lot of quilters do anyway, to make their quilt blocks really, really like sing, and to match up really, really nice. So that is what I'm doing now. And then what we're going to be doing is you're going to be taking your blocks, and you're going to be putting 6 across, 7 rows down. So that's where you're going to see me next. I've sewn my 8.5 inch blocks together, when I've trimmed them down. I have my 8.5 inch blocks. I have 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 across, and I have the 7 down. And I've gone ahead and I've actually taken my 2-inch strips, my 2-inch by 42-inch strips, and I've made my my side border, my inner border, and my top border. My quilt, before I put my borders on, measures 49 inches across and 56 inches down, having trimmed up my blocks to the 8.5 inches. So I've cut my my borders, the 56 inches across. I mean the 56 inches down, and then I put my I've cut my top border a bit longer. To compensate for the edges here, about 53. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to construct my side borders, my end border, the exact way that I won't be showing you how I'm doing it, because I've shown you already with my my blocks. Taking 80 out of these, and I'm just going to be stitching the 2-inch by 5-inch right along, just as I did with the to construct the blocks. Just going to be doing this on all of the remaining 2-inch strips, and then what we're going to do is exactly the same. We're going to subcut these into this unit and just start stitching them vertically together, and I'll show you my next step. I'm coming to the end of making my quilt top here. As you can see, I've put on my 2-inch sashing, and I've created my units here, the same exact way I created my blocks. And just for your information, on this size of a quilt, I used 22 2-inch by 5-inch pieces down the side borders, the long side, and I used 19 pieces of the 2x5 on the top and on the bottom. And then I've attached remember we cut out 4 5-inch squares, and there on the corners are my 4 5-inch squares. So now I gotta choose a backing for my quilt. You'll have seen that, and I don't know how I'm gonna quilt this, just maybe even an all over, I'm not sure. I gotta sleep on it, figure out how I'm going to quilt it, but there's our quilt. Oh, and the 2.5 inch binding. Usually I like 2.25 inch binding, but because this quilt, because there's so much white in it, I wanted a bit of a wider binding. So I've cut my bindings 2.5 inches, and that's our bag. That's the remaining bag. What I will do is I will go, before I put my binding on and before I even sandwich it with my backing and my batting, I'm just going to put a small, like a stay stitch, just a small stitch all the way around all the sides, the 4 sides of this quilt, just so this doesn't get wobbly or starts coming out, because there's so many seams, and just to secure the edge around it. And then I'm just going to back it. I'm going to back it and put my batting in, and yeah, you'll have seen the quilt. Yeah, so I'm gonna do that now.